So let's talk about dividing fractions. Now, I know the students, when they're just like with multiplying fractions, they look at division of fractions and they become confused because they think when they're dividing that it actually looks like multiplication. But let's look at, just like we do with multiplication, let's look at the pattern of dividing fractions. So we're going to use 6 here as our dividend. And then our divisor, the number that we're dividing by. If we look at that number, I'm starting from a bigger number and I'm going down to a smaller number. Well, then if we look over here at our quotient or our answer, you'll notice that that number is small, but then it continues to get bigger. So following that pattern, if we do 6 divided by that divisor of 1/2, which is smaller than the 1, it would only make sense that our quotient should be bigger so that it can continue to follow the pattern. Now, in this video today, I'm going to have to show you 2 different ways of division because division doesn't have that commutative property like multiplication. It does matter which number is the dividend and which one's the divisor. So in 5th grade, though, the good thing is that they only have to divide a whole number by a unit fraction or a unit fraction by a whole number, and a unit fraction meaning that there's a 1 in the numerator. Let's begin with looking at a division problem of a whole number by a unit fraction. So let's say that Johnny has 5 chocolate chip cookies and he wants to split each cookie into half. And how many people can eat the cookies. So we're looking at seeing how many halves are in the 5. So I'm going to take this and I'm just going to split them into halves, 2 parts. And then we can count up how many halves we have. And as you can see, we counted up that there is 10 halves in the 5. So 5 divided by a half equals 10. Here's another problem. It's an example of dividing a whole number by a fraction, but it's worded a little bit different. So I wanted to make sure that I highlighted this type of problem so that when kids are reading through their work that they don't get confused by it. So this problem says, how many 1/4 cups are in 6 whole cups of milk? So when we're looking at this, we're really thinking, okay, there's 6 whole cups of milk, so we need to divide those into fourths. So I'm going to divide each of the cups of milk into a fourth. And as you can see here now, each one is in the fourth. So now we're thinking how many 4th cups are in the 6 wholes, so then we're going to count each of the 4th cups. And as you can see, we counted up each of the 4th cups, so we ended up having 24 4th cups in the 6 whole cup milks. So if we write that equation, it would be 6 divided by a 4th equals 24. Now let's look at dividing a unit fraction by a whole number. This is where I see the most trouble from kids because they're not quite sure what to look at for the answer. I'll admit this one I had to find my own special way of drawing it so that I could understand it and I could see it. So let's go through this together. Let's say that we have a birthday cake that is split into fourths, and a birthday party, they ate the cake and there was 1/4 left over. In this problem, I went ahead and highlighted the 1/4 of the cake that was left over. And then what we're going to do is, let's say a couple of kids the next day, there were 2 kids who wanted to share the rest of that cake. So we're going to be looking at the 1/4 of the cake that was left over, and we're going to divide it by 2. So what we're going to do is that we're going to divide that section into 2 parts. But here's where the kids just want to look at that 1/4 part that's left over, but you have to still think of the 1/4 is still part of 1 whole. So when we go to divide it, we need to make sure that we split every section into the fourths. We can't forget about the rest of the whole of that cake. So as you can see, if we had the 1/4 of the birthday cake left over, and 2 kids are going to be sharing it, how much is each person going to get? So we're going to look at the one part that they would get, and that's going to be 1 out of the total of 8 parts. So each child would get 1/8 of the cake that's left over. Let's look at one more of a fraction divided by a whole number. So let's say in this one, after dinner, there was half of a cheese pizza left over. And so the next day, there were 3 people who wanted to share that half of the pizza. So how much of the pizza would each person get? Now, what I usually see with students that they want to just draw that 1/2 and divide it into 3 parts. And they would say, oh, each person would get 1/3, but what they have forgotten is the other half of that pizza. So let's get rid of that concept and let's go back and let's look at it again. So yes, there is 1/2 left, but you need to still imagine you have half of the whole pizza that they originally started with. So what I like to do, and this is how I see it, is I draw the 1/2 with the solid lines because that's how much of the pizza that's left over. And then what I do is I make a dotted line for the other half of the pizza. So that way, for me, I can see that there's the rest of the pizza left, but it doesn't have that solid line so that I can focus on the part that is actually left. Now, there's 3 people who want to share the leftover pizza. Now remember, like I talked about in the previous problem, that when we go to divide this, we need to make sure that they divide the whole thing into 3 parts. And, oops, I meant to do it this way. I like to do the dotted line there, so that way I don't get confused. Let me try that again. So I'm going to divide it, and then this part that I don't need, I do the dotted line. So that way, in my mind, I can still see that it's there, but then when I go to focus on my answer, I'm only looking at the solid part of the line. So if the 3 people want to share the pizza, the half of the pizza, how much of the pizza they're going to get? So each person would get this part, but how many parts was the pizza broken into? Then we can see there's 1, 2, 3. Don't forget this other part because it still counts in with the whole. 4, 5, 6. So each person would get 1/6 of the pizza that's left over.